All right, here we are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be around the world. I was trying to channel my best Julian Wood because, as you can see, I am not Julian Wood. I'm Eric Johnson, and we are here for Serverless Office Hours. And with me, I have some pretty interesting folks, pretty distinguished, interesting folks talking about something. I'm going to be honest. I know what it is. I don't know how it works. And I'm super excited to be talking about this. But before we do that, let's kind of go around and let me throw out to our watchers. Let me know where you're watching from. We love to know where you are and what you're interested in. And this is an office hours. That means you throw in questions. These are experts. So you throw in questions and we'll get them to answer it, and we'll have a good time. So with that, I'm going to go around here and tell us who you are, what you do, and what you're doing here. So Theo, let's start with you.
Hey everyone, yeah, I'm Theo. I'm a principal specialist solution architect working with Athena.
All righty. So that's going to be a thematic here, I feel like. Scott, what about you?
Thanks, Eric. Scott Rigney, Principal Product Manager for the Athena service.
All righty. And Vijay?
Hey guys, happy to be here. I'm Vijay. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for Athena.
All righty. And finally, Andy.
Hey, I'm Andy. I'm an engineer across a bunch of our storage and analytics teams, and I'm also an Athena user.
Nice. An Athena user. So Athena is the theme for today. And we're going to, and like I said, I remember when we announced this, and I'm super excited to hear about that. Before we jump there, there's a connection here, if I'm not mistaken. You all knew each other in a past life and a future life. So I'm going to explain that.
Yeah, we have this funny story about kind of some shared Athena experiences. So Vijay and I were both product managers on the Athena service for a couple of years. And about halfway through the time that we were working together, we realized that we also worked at the same company at different times, but in a previous life. So we thought that was a funny connection. And Vijay, anything you'd add to that?
No, it was a small world. So it's funny that I spent time with Scott when I was product managing Athena in the service team, and that kind of gives me the technical know-how of how Athena actually works. And I'm looking to leverage that in my product marketing role now to really bring new features to light in Athena.
Okay, so I got to ask the question, and I'll say this is for me, but what is Athena? If you're standing in an elevator and someone looks at you and says, "What is Athena? What is it?" Who wants to take that one?
I'll bite. Only because I think there's an interesting way to talk about that and answer that question. So
okay.
what we often say is how Athena is our serverless interactive query service, and it has this mission of making it simple to run SQL on your data lake. And then we kind of gauge people's facial reactions, and then we say, but think of Athena as the SQL API for your S3 data, right? So but a SQL API is a place where I can send a query and get back a result, right? And so that's like the core premise of Athena is it's a serverless stack providing this simple endpoint to pass a query and get a response back. And right. that's the whole ball game essentially.
Okay, so hang on a minute. So you're telling me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I've got a bunch of CSV files, or I've got a bunch of text files, or I've got a bunch of whatever. Does it just search the titles of those, or can it go into those as well?
Yeah, it can go pretty far. So let's unpack a little bit how data kind of comes to you in the service, right? So if you have that CSV data, likely that's off in your S3 general purpose bucket today. To bring that data over to Athena and start working with it, you basically hop into the Athena console and you create a table pointing at the CSV file that you've got. And what you've done there is you've registered this CSV file as a table in the Glue data catalog. So this is now a queryable object. So you can then go run a select star, select count stars, do analytics on your S3 data without having to load it into a database, create storage for that, right? Because you've actually decoupled the storage of that CSV data, which you're using for analytics, from the compute that you're using to execute the query. And today we support a wide range of formats beyond CSV. So formats like Parquet and Iceberg, JSON, and others. Athena Service has very deep capabilities where basically allowing it to perform very advanced filtering operations depending on the file type. So Parquet is one of our most common formats. It's a format that we recommend, and it works really great at S3 scale because of its columnar design. And one of the things that Athena is able to do, well, I'll give you two. When Athena encounters a Parquet object, it can do advanced, predicate pushdown operations, allowing it to basically look into a Parquet file and pluck out individual elements through nested pruning operations. So this allows Athena to read your data with great throughput and only reading the minimal data that's needed to basically answer your query. And what's really neat is how governance kind of fits into that picture too. If you have this Parquet or a CSV data that you've registered with the Glue data catalog, you're able to then go ahead and define fine-grained access permissions on that data, which Athena enforces when executing queries. So you have a fast and performant analysis experience.
Wow. All right. So we had a question on that coming in. That wow of me is, okay, I'm processing that. And it makes sense. In my, I don't know if I'm the oldest one here, but I'm probably pretty old. In my days of data, it was, I remember, Andy's chuckling. We'll see. We'll talk about that, Andy. We'll see. But in my previous history, I've never been a big data guy, but I do remember having, all right, the worst part of analyzing data was getting it all to the same place or getting it where you could. Now it all looks alike. Now I've touched every row to add and stuff like that. So the power of this is amazing. We did have a question come in, and it's a great question, basically based on where we are today in the world. But the question is, does it vectorize the data?
Interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can take that. So we have Athena doesn't do vectorization of data, but we have services like OpenSearch, which allows you to store vector data for similarity searches and things like that. So that'll be more appropriate for the vector search use case.
All righty. So the different kind of purposes here.
Yeah, so the use case is completely right. It's a text-based search where you need to find the closest match.
Okay.
Yeah, and OpenSearch is more appropriate. There are other purpose-built services like Neptune. Neptune is another vector database that we offer.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this, and Andy, I'll point this at you. And I know we're going off just a little bit. We're coming back, but if you're going vector, are you going vector buckets? Or are you going OpenSearch?
I like them both, Eric.
Okay.
I think I think the thing that we find with OpenSearch, it obviously has like a ton of history building into both like vector, hybrid text search, and like a broader set of search facilities, right? With its background with Lucene and things like that. And so traditionally it was a provision thing. We've really moved toward serverless on it as well.
Right. Right.
As like a sort of, like provision construct, right? It's a thing that you can stand up and get great performance on top of stuff. On the S3 vector side, which we just launched in December, it's much more anchored in storage cost, right? Like it's the observation that in a lot of cases, folks want to create those vectors and they don't necessarily use them all the time. The vectors can actually be larger than the data they index, especially for text data. And so, you often want to really minimize the cost of the storage of that index and just be able to, pay for access when you use it. And so it's much more anchored around that like fully elastic experience of building on vectors.
Okay. That makes total sense.
The two things are integrated in a way that you can hydrate up from vectors to OpenSearch as well. So
nice. Yeah, I've used both, love them both. Different reasons, and I love the storage angle. I think a lot of times we don't think about that. I didn't know that vectors could possibly be bigger than the data they're representing, so that's really interesting. So We have a couple more questions come in, but I'm going to hold them for a moment because I want to kind of get into what we're talking about. We're talking about Athena, obviously, but we're also talking about analytics. And so I don't know who wants to jump on this, but are you ready for me to share a screen?
We're ready.
Yeah.
We don't know what's
Alrighty.
coming, but we're ready.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is the PowerPoint you wanted to show. You wanted to do a few and talk through a little bit of that. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Here
Let's
we
go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what we wanted to kind of discuss here is, how are folks using Athena today? If you take that simple premise of I have a SQL endpoint, serverless, compute behind the scenes with tight integrations to the catalog with permissions, where are customers taking that, right? So we often like to talk about a range of use cases on top of this, versatile experience that Athena provides. Interactive analytics, we kind of talk about that as that's really the bread and butter use case for Athena of an analyst or a data engineer having a SQL query that they've typed and they want to execute. And they can come to the Athena console, they can come to our other UIs, which we'll show later in the session, to develop and execute that query. So think about that as kind of the core interactive analytics experience where you're a human user, maybe an agentic user in the future, but a human user expecting a fast response. Then you have kind of like the business intelligence or self-service model of that, where you have Athena plugging into third-party applications, Tableau, Power BI, or Amazon QuickSuite, for example, where users are doing more of a drag and drop operation, reading data from their S3 data lakes and creating visualizations or interacting with the data through kind of a text-driven interfaces. And then some of the things we want to kind of highlight today is interactive analytics has many legs, right? So places where this is showing up today in the apps and experiences that we all use in our daily lives is really interesting. So a theme that we're starting to see more and more of is agentic. So we're seeing customers take our various AWS service and MCP servers and use them to augment traditional experiences that they have in their applications. And what's really neat about that is you can sort of take what is today a natural language experience and wire that in so you have a new kind of format and interface around interactive analytics. So again, a user showing up, expressing a natural language question, MCP plus other agentic frameworks being able to resolve that question into instructions and code, which show up to us as a SQL query, and execute that on the Athena service. And so we'll actually show you a little bit about how that works today within one of our products called SageMaker Unified Studio later. And then another theme that's super interesting that we want to highlight today is the concept of an analytics application. So these are user-facing applications that you probably have seen in your daily comings and goings, where you see some kind of little analytics-driven insight around something that you're doing online. So it could be a flight delay, prediction around the cost of a flight over the next some number of days, along with a recommendation to buy now, right? So these are analytics applications that we're seeing a lot of customers take queries and plumb into Athena and use Athena as, again, this serverless, simple to use, scalable query engine for the vast data that they're storing in S3 today. So those are some kind of really interesting use cases that we're seeing customers build, scale, and operate on the service. And we'll show you a little bit more what those look like in a little bit.
Before we jump forward, I want to step back, actually, because we have a question that came in. And I think it's kind of interesting because I think sometimes when we say analytics, it can mean different things to different people. And so the question was, how does serverless architecture benefit analytic workloads? That's one question, and I want to answer that, and obviously one of y'all can answer that. But the other is, so how does analytics benefit serverless architecture workloads? So it's kind of two ways. So I think to answer that and kind of get this idea is, when you all say analytics, what does that mean? And how are we applying it here or elsewhere? And I know it's a really broad question, but I think people get caught up on that sometimes.
I usually tell customers when they ask me that question, what is analytics? I tell them that it's when you use group by in SQL.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the solution right there. That's funny.
It's sort of, yeah, it is sort of the activity of trying to find meaning in data, or trying to find patterns, mine insights from big or sometimes small data sets as well. Often involving group by, but of course not limited to group by.
Hey, but Theo, like, there's a thing that's super cool here, and I think it goes to the question, and it's a thing that we should totally talk about. I like the way that Eric asked that, which is, you can ask about what serverless is for analytics, but I don't know if that's exactly the story of Athena, right? I think the thing that's remarkable about Athena is there is an absolute ton of data in an S3. And we all have a ton of data, whether they're like logs or internal state or whatever that we deal with in our jobs. And historically, if you want to go and do that group by query or like any query at the end of the day, step one is like go choose your like engine, right? Like go stand up Spark or go stand up like Redshift or like pick your thing and like go plan it out, like get the data into a schema like Eric was saying earlier, and then you can like start to ask questions.
Yeah.
And a thing that is absolutely remarkable about Athena as a serverless query engine is it, like the diagram just said, it gears first toward ad hoc queries, right? Like it's very easy to get data in and it's very easy to ask a question, which means that a customer that builds on top of Athena is often not a conventional analytics, data warehousing, data lake customer, right? They might be building an app for something totally different, or they might just be curious about a bunch of data that they have. And like just removing all the friction like Athena does to being able to like just get down to asking questions with that data is like a thing that I think actually opens up like app building and not just analytics stuff, right? We're just seeing that kind of pattern really emerge, and it's really cool.
Yeah, I used to be I used to be a customer. So in 2016, that's almost 10 years ago now, Athena was launched at reInvent, and I remember watching that keynote, looking at and thinking, this new service is going to solve so many of the problems that I've been struggling with. We're working at a small startup. We did data integration, data visualization, very bespoke sort of situations for our customers. And we had like so many others. Like we just put all of our data on S3. That's where it landed. That's where it did. And then we had a lot of code just about moving that data from S3 into different data warehouses, databases, and engines. And Athena just, well, you can just run your queries against your data on S3. And for me, it was like I just saw that and wow, we can just cut out all that complications, all of that moving data around, getting it into the right place to be able to query it. And we could just run the queries straight from our application onto the data on S3. And it was just such a simplification of what we were doing.
Yeah, I think from my standpoint on this, I think a lot of times we confuse analytics with data. Data analytics, right? Data can be analyzed, and I'm certainly not an expert, as I've proven over and over. It's the job I was a solutions architect. A lot of you watching, and you would sit in a room, and we would help customers. And one of the first things I'd ask them is, are you collecting data? How are your analytics? Oh yeah, we store a lot of data. Okay, that's great. What are you doing with that? And then they'll look at me silly, like, we store it. It's like, okay, are you getting the story out of that? And so the analytics really is that story that comes out of the data, and by tools like Athena. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I think I may have had an internet weird thing where it dropped, but if I drop, Jeff's got you. Just keep going. So, but by these solutions like Athena, the ability to tell the story becomes much easier. and to find the edge case stories and stuff. And so I love that idea when we're talking about what are the analytics, how much story can we tell, and how much can we improve on that story by what the data is telling us. That's the end of my little soapbox.
And how quickly we can get to that story as well. Like we have the data on S3, we can just run those queries, we can connect that to an application and get that out there almost immediately.
Yeah.
And also it scales to 0. So coming back to that serverless aspect of it, when you're not using Athena, there's nothing there. There's nothing that you need to manage. There's nothing that you need to pay for. So you get those benefits of the simplicity of the time to market and also the scale to 0 aspect.
And I think there's an interesting element to that, which is there's analytics and then there's analysis, right? So in my mind, analysis is this journey that you go on when your goal is to answer some business question, right? So which products are selling this month, which ones are doing, maybe ahead versus behind plan. The query you write to answer that question may initially look like this and then morph into this and take you on a very different journey. So in my experience working in data science prior to kind of moving into a product management role, like that's the process of analysis. And this is what I think Athena does really well, is it allows us to sort of plug into these different contexts and interfaces where people want to do that analysis. And to Andy's point, it makes it dead simple to send a query. Start with a query, get a response back, iterate, keep modifying, focusing your analysis until you're able to sort of tell a story through the analysis that you've performed. So that's where I think totally spot on. There's data, storing of it. There's analytics, which is maybe the overall overarching use case. But then analysis is the experience that we're providing on top of Athena. We're trying to make that simple so there can be multiple different personas who are leveraging the service for what they need to get done with their data.
Right. Cool. Okay. So we had another question come in, but then after this, I thought we'd go into where can we use Athena, or where does that make sense? The question came in. We've got actually a bunch, and we may pop around, but to kind of keep it on track here. When querying data from S3 using Athena, does it matter if it's structured, or can you query unstructured data?
This is a good one, because I think we would say most data is structured, meaning Parquet. These are columnar structured data, but it can contain unstructured or semi-structured elements, right? So Athena allows you to bring what I would say structured and semi-structured data, kind of stopping short of the traditional definition of unstructured data, which would be images, videos, things of that sort. So we primarily think in terms of semi-structured or structured.
Okay, very cool.
But things like application logs, CSV files, JSON structures, and all the way up to those really highly structured Parquet files all work really well.
Nice. The super unstructured is where you want to get back into like your embedding and things like that. So, and maybe not entirely, there's probably a blanket statement, but that's the way I think about it.
Just to add something there, because I think this is where, and we love working with Andy and this S3 team, and I'm sitting right near them at this moment, but we have really interesting features that kind of bridge these two worlds. So S3 metadata, for example, a feature we launched, I think a little bit over a year and a half ago, kind of has this collection of all of your unstructured data. So your images, videos, things like that it more fall into the category of unstructured data. That's a data set that you can actually look at in Athena, right? It's an S3 table, which is another premise that we support and work natively with. So there's a lot of these really cool kind of integration points. And I think this speaks to the broader simplicity mantra of the Athena service, is to find what's hard about doing analysis and try to remove the friction so you can kind of do the job that you need to done with minimal frustration and friction. So just wanted to highlight that.
Hey, there's a thing we could talk about for just a second before you dive into details, which I think you should totally do. But I think that we talked about the serverless aspect of Athena being a thing that really removes friction from being able to launch a query, right? You don't have to stand stuff up. And I think a thing that I've seen like really emerge over the last year that I'm excited about with Athena is like the friction for like end-to-end curiosity is kind of collapsing. And so like here's a really simple personal example on this. I use Athena to work with log data a ton, right? Like I do operational log dives with it, right? Like I'm constantly working with logs, and I find the fact that I can just like I said before, just dive into Athena and fire off some queries and then walk away and not worry about like setting stuff up or tearing things down to be valuable. The tool that I have moved to use for that, and that I see like in so many customer conversations on it, is like an agentic CLI, right? It's open code or Claude code or Kiro CLI, right? That I'm like going into that with. And as much as we talk about those tools from a software development perspective, talking about them from an analytics perspective is like actually really remarkable, because it's kind of the other half of the friction. And so my experience with this, like a couple of months ago, is digging in on a bunch of our logs that we had like punched into Iceberg tables, right? So we'd done the work to like move the logs into log groups in Iceberg, and a bunch of our teams had actually like written wiki pages about like the definitions of the columns, right? And like they had their own run books on, you know, if you're seeing this kind of like behavior and you want to go and investigate it, right? Here's the query to issue. And so I sat down with the agentic tool, and I got the tool to read all of the run books, and I got it to write skills that like embedded that knowledge. And then now I have those skills. We've shared those around the team, right? And the agent's actually like a really, really experienced operator at this point on top of our logs. And when I sit down with like a window of time that I want to look at, I'll often go like, hey, what's going on in this window? And I'll watch the CLI issue like 30 landscape queries, right? Like it'll just go like wham. Here's a bunch of queries to go and understand the shape of this data. And it'll be all like, you know, limit 10, you know, kind of sort of like range queries and stuff like that to just go and get the sense of things. And it'll come back with a summary of what's going on. Like there's like, seems to be some errors here, or like latencies seem high or whatever. And then I can ask the follow-on questions. And it's less around like something really specific about like, you know, like wonderful agentic stuff, and more just around like moving us closer to having a conversation with data. And I think that combination of like embedding our knowledge about the data in a skill and having this like on-demand serverless query API is a thing that is like a really, really cool emerging pattern to just ask questions and get going with stuff.
I really like this idea, because when we think about, had you not known it, had I had done this, I would have pointed one of the agents at an S3 bucket and said, okay, start reading all these files, and completely agentic, right? Read them all in, then try to decipher what, and then it's too much, you know. Versus there's already a language the data speaks, right? Learn it. So I love your approach. Learn the language the data speaks, which is Parquet or whatever. I hope I said that right. I'm now a data analyst. There it is right there. And so, but learn that language, and then we can move a lot faster. And so, yeah, I love that approach, and that's really cool. This mix of, I think sometimes we throw out the baby with the bathwater, and then we say, okay, I'm only going to use an agent and nothing that exists, whereas we have fantastic stuff like this that exists. Getting my soapbox there. So, all right. So I have a ton more questions, but I'm going to hold them for a moment because I know we have a demo and some other things we're going to show. So Theo, you have a demo you were going to show, right?
Yeah, so I'm actually, you'd think that this was scripted, but we were talking about like showing something very close to what Andy is talking about now. Okay. So let's actually.
Sorry, I was in front of the script. Sorry about that.
Let's jump into that, because it is a very interesting like age that we are in now, where we can start talking about talking to our data. So what we're seeing here on the screen now is SageMaker Unified Studio, which is our IDE for analytics, where you can go to look into your looking at your catalog, all the data that you have in tables, and what you have on available that you can work with, and then you can start working with that data as perhaps if you're a data scientist, data engineer, analyst, developer, or just someone who wants to get started working with the data.
Hey,
So
Theo,
imagine, like, yeah.
If you can, I'm going to have you bump that up one more. It could just be my small screen, but we'll make sure everybody can read that. If you can't, no big deal. There you go.
Yeah,
If that's too big, I understand. But
yeah, we'll see how that works.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Yeah. No, thank you. So yeah, like what Andy was talking about there is sort of imagine that we're not S3, but that we started the company yesterday. It's about we want to analyze flight data and understand where are the busy times of the year for flights in the US, and sort of help you figure out how to avoid the rushes and the really tight dates where everyone else is flying, something like that. And here in SageMaker Unified Studio, I previously set up some data that we could work with to get started building this and trying to figure out like how to get going. And I'm in the data section now, looking at our catalog, and I set that table up here. I've got the data set with flight data for from the US. And it's like data is, it's messy. It has a ton of columns, and the names of the columns are kind of weird. We don't really know what this data is about. And if we were a team like Andy's, we might have written documentation, run books, all of that. But we just started this company, so we don't have that much information to go on yet. But we're hoping that we will start gathering that. So one thing that I really like to do, also kind of what Andy was talking about before, is I actually need to think I need to decrease the size a little bit here to get my get everything to show on the screen.
Yeah, this is the fun of presenting right here.
Exactly.
It's all like huge in your face, probably.
So, yeah, we don't really have enough space here to show the data agent. This is sort of the central piece to the demo.
Yep. Welcome to our world.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see if we get it to.
While you're working on that, with Daryl Ruggles, who's a longtime watcher and throughout, hey guys, Daryl's a big serverless guy, does a ton of serverless stuff, blogs, posts, stuff like that. He said they use Athena a lot. Really love using serverless tools like this. So,
thanks, Daryl.
Yeah.
Theo, maybe talk through kind of where in the UI we're trying to bring up.
Yeah. So so what I did there was sort of when I started looking for the data agent was I was in the catalog. I created a notebook from my table, jumping from the catalog into a notebook view to be able to start analyzing my data. I will use the inline editor instead. The panel to the side won't show up at this zoom level. So what I was trying to go was to start working and conversing with my data, kind of like Andy was talking about. Like, I have this data set that I don't know very much about, and I want to get started working with this, being able to ask questions to it. One thing that I like to start with is just run this, show me the first 100 rows of data. Give me an idea of what I'm working with. And in SageMaker Unified Studio, in the notebook environment, I can just create a new SQL cell, pick Athena as my engine, and run that sort of limit 100, give me an idea of what the data that I'm working with. So we have here, we get some visualizations as well about what kind of distribution, like how many distinct values do my columns have, and so on. And as you could see, like just like before, it is a very wide data set with lots of different columns with a lot of weird data that we might not be interested in. But it's a flight data set. Our company is about understanding flights and understanding sort of congestion on airports and things like that. So something that I might want to start with, just to see what kind of data are we working with. I could spend hours and hours digging into this, understanding how to figure things out. But I will want to ask the data agent that we have available in SageMaker Unified Studio. I want to know what are the busiest airports in the US.
And this is an interesting one, Theo, because the word busiest has meaning to it, right? So how do you translate that into a SQL query?
Exactly.
Not very easy, right?
So what's really cool here is just suggested a new query for me. I'll just accept that, and you can see that I got a diff like saying, "Hey, here's how to change your query to do what you want." And yeah, it figured out that, well, by busy it probably meant the most flights, and by destination it figured out, well, there's a couple of columns that are about destinations, the city name, the state name. So it figured out, like, yeah, you probably wanted the destination city and you wanted the number of flights. So let's try to run that and see what we get.
And just to interject here, there was a question about how critical or why metadata management is important in modern data lake. So this is a perfect example where with metadata management, you get the additional context you need to make your data AI ready. So Theo was able to use that natural language prompt to generate the SQL because we have access to the metadata here, which is used to generate the SQL query with the understanding that, like, when he's saying busiest, it's using the right operator in the query.
So when you're building your data, it's just critical to explain your data.
Exactly.
Right,
Metadata allows you to do that
metadata.
and add the governance layer on top so that, like, the user gets access to the data, which based on the allowed policy set by the company, and also is able to discover the metadata and the context around the data.
Amazing. I was posting some links, so I was just catching up on this, and it's mind blowing to talk just natural language and have it figure out the query. This is incredible. Yeah.
And like, I'm not from the US, but like, does this look reasonable? Atlanta, a big airport,
oh,
right?
Yeah. Busiest airport in the world, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Would it be an airport that you choose to fly through, or would that be something like to avoid that? That's the congested.
Yeah.
It's hard to avoid.
Interesting.
It's hard to avoid.
Yeah.
Like, and let's find out how congested it is. Like, and if it's like, if there's any time of the year where it wouldn't be as bad. So let's ask the data agent to dig deeper into this and see if we can create.
How current is this data?
This is 2024.
Okay, that's good.
If I remember correctly. So
right now our airports are a little crazy. So yeah.
Let's ask data agent to see if we can get a chart showing the flights over time from the top city. And I'm sort of continuing on the theme of like being a little bit vague because I want to understand this data, and I'm busy. I don't want to have to pick out the value. I'll just continue driving this with the agent. So it suggests new code, a new SQL query, a little bit more complex this time. Let's see what we get when we run this. So it figured out, like it generated a new query that finds that top city and then uses that top city to it uses that top city as the origin city in the query. And when we do this, we get a new table with the year, the month, and the number of flights. And I can pick the I can sort of switch views from looking at a table and looking at a chart instead to get that idea of how does that look throughout the year. So let's see, we'll pick month, and then the y-axis would be the number of flights. So we can get a rough idea of like how the flights, number of flights out of Atlanta changes throughout the year. Maybe we want that
mid-year.
more.
That surprises me.
Yeah, maybe
You think it'd be
a
December or
more,
something? Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we want a little bit more granular. So let's ask it to change it to by day.
I love how we say please and thank you to models.
Yeah, it does work. Like it is. It also feels good.
Yeah. You're right. It's just common courtesy.
So now I accepted that, and you can see that it added the day of the month as well. So we get that additional data point.
Yeah. So
Cool.
Theo,
Yeah.
something maybe just to click on, like when we talk about Athena and some of the kind of neat features it has behind the scenes, like you kind of started with a simple query, and now you're in much more of the more complex query territory, I would kind of argue. One of the things, just as a sidebar, that Athena is doing as each of these queries are coming is it's looking at the metadata and the query plan, and it's making an intelligent guess about how many workers are needed to run this query optimally.
Yeah.
And so if you think about, this is the serverless office hours. So think about that experience in a cluster-based application that potentially you would manage as a sort of a parallel experience. You would have to either set those things up as cluster configurations or pass constraints with each individual query. And what Athena is doing automatically and by default is it's trying to figure this out for you, right? And so this is some of the really interesting nuances in operating the service that are really hiding behind that simple API that we talked about earlier. So just wanted to give that example because as you see across experiences, we're getting pretty quick experience, right? Queries are coming back in a couple seconds, and you're able to kind of follow your curiosity with the data, which is really great.
Yeah. And as you may have guessed, just from the number of flights that we saw in some of those those results, this was a data set of many millions of flights, and we could just work we could sort of work at the speed of thought when looking into that data and digging deeper into it.
Yep.
So that comes down to, and if you want to get a little more granular, we actually had a question come in on this. Lewis has actually sent a lot of questions. Sorry, I'm not getting to all of them, Lewis, but we're, it's doing, but this is interesting, is how do you optimize performance in serverless analytics platform? So what are you doing to make this, because that was one of the things I was going to talk about, that is really fast. So that wasn't a subset of partial data, that was full on data. What are we doing to make it fast like this?
Yeah, we have a great blog post on this that me and a few of our colleagues have collaborated on over the years that goes into very much detail in how to optimize Athena queries. And the top trick that we share there, and sort of the thing that I always tell customers is that the really key thing is how you structure the data. It's really not about how you write your queries, but how you structure the storage part. And part of that is picking file formats and using highly structured data like Parquet. But you can also get really good performance with semi-structured data through organizing it on S3 in what we call partitions. So partition is sort of this granular, or like think of it as a directory. When you organize your data, you tend to put it into directories, and maybe you have one level that is the date and another that is the from the flights data, perhaps the airport. And this helps the engine to very quickly exclude a lot of data from processing when you run a query. So if I say, hey, give me the number of flights throughout the year from Atlanta, if we've partitioned the data based on the airport code, for example, we don't need to look at any data from other airports. We can just look at Atlanta. Or if I say, give me the number of flights in March across all airports, we can just look at the dates in March and can just ignore the data from other dates. So strategies like that are really crucial.
Yeah, and there's interesting ramifications of this too, and also other features that you can sort of leverage. So as Theo highlighted, like kind of thinking about the structure and your access pattern kind of together, that's a hard problem, right? This is where our S3 tables features kind of come into the mix, where if you're leveraging Iceberg for for a very different kind of form of partitioning, you're able to kind of get benefits in simplicity around like having to make some of those decisions, which is a really novel kind of change over the last handful of years. And then there's other features that are really interesting, like if you have partitioned your data, if you think of Theo's data set, you had airports, the airport code, there's thousands of those, hundreds of thousands, right? If you've partition your data along the airport code, when Athena is planning queries, it's having to kind of make these guesses about, where is the data located, and it's accessing each of those partitions and talking to the Glue service to learn about them and use those in planning. Glue has a neat feature called partition indexing, which accelerates that to basically a constant time lookup process. So there's other features that you can kind of turn on and off in the catalog that help Athena go faster. And there's also storage decisions that you can make, which I highlighted. So it's an art and something that folks like Theo, who have been kind of working in the data lake, kind of space for some time, have learned these tips and tricks. But we definitely recommend that top 10 tuning tips is a great place to kind of see from our experts what are the most compelling and awesome tuning recommendations that we have. So give that a look.
Okay.
Jeff posted that. Our producer posted that link as well, and I would go one step back too from what y'all are doing. One of the struggles is getting the data in the right format, right? And one of the things, and maybe this is a shameless plug, but one of the things that I love to use is I'll have a raw bucket for my data, and then I point step functions and dynamic I just point step functions at it, and I will tell it, okay, go. The dynamic mapping. Sorry, the name wasn't coming to me. That just happens. And point it at it and say, okay. But here's my question for you, Theo. When you were talking about the partitioning, right? You said, okay, we want to look at March for everyone. Now we want to look at February for everyone, and now we want to look at airport for everyone. Are those, when you're partitioning, are you having one bucket's full of all of March? Are you having another one's full of all the airports? Or is there a drill down that happens on that? I guess what I'm saying is, are there different pictures of the data based on the partitions?
So
the same data.
Yeah, the partitions are just one organization of the data. So you basically organize. You organize it kind of hierarchically. Maybe date first, then the airport code, and then that's where your data files are.
Okay.
But when you query it, that's the cool thing, is when you query it, it doesn't matter that much. If you don't really need to worry so much about the hierarchy. You can still. Athena you will map those partitions into the catalog, and like Scott mentioned before, there are things like partition indexing that makes any sort of slicing of the partitioning space fast. I'd like what you're saying, sort of you have that bucket of just all of your raw data. I do, of course, like something similar to that, and I like it how you can use Athena to query that data as it is, where it is. Mm-hmm. It might not be the fastest because you haven't organized it in a good way. It's maybe not the most efficient file formats and so on, but you can still run queries against it. And then you can use Athena to move that data into a more structured format with Parquet data, or into Iceberg into an iceberg table or even into S3 tables. So you can sort of start where you are. This is also what I always tell customers. You don't need to do all the work up front before you get starting understanding your data and figuring out what's valuable, what you want to keep, what you want to actually build your higher or lower latency, higher value dashboards on. Start where you are. Just start querying.
Super interesting.
Hey,
That's
so
super cool.
guys, we spent a whole bunch of time talking about like how to use Athena and like what you can get using it. I feel like it's a missed opportunity in serverless office hours not to talk about like how Athena works, right? The thing that I think is like one of the coolest bits about all the serverless stuff is we really drive for simplicity. And there's actually like a fair bit of sophistication under the covers to get simplicity. And Athena, I know, is like no outlier on that thing. There's a ton of cool stuff under Athena. So like, do you wanna just like walk through how a query works, or like walk through what's happening under the covers a little bit?
Questions like that will get you invited back, sir. Just a heads up.
Sure.
Who wants to run with this?
So I just shared the slide, Eric, like if you can.
Okay.
So this is the slide
Sorry.
we had as a backup, like if the question comes up. So this kind of shows like at a very high level, the query execution flow in Athena. The way it works is like when a query arrives to Athena, it doesn't matter where you type that query, whether it was console or whether it was a Python script via SDK, or you used it within a BI tool, it all hits the same place, a very simple Athena endpoint. That's like the simplicity of Athena. Like, it's a stateless API call. You don't need to manage any sessions. You don't need to configure any connection pools, or like you don't need to handle any cluster handles. You just send the query to Athena endpoint and it starts executing. And in the execution process, it first discovers the metadata, which is the glue data catalog we were talking about. And that's where the metadata management is super critical here. It allows you to make the data discovery faster, so the query can perform faster, leveraging the metadata stored in your metadata layer. And then it looks at the access controls and policies and plans the query. In the query planning phase, depending on the needs of the query, Athena allocates compute. If the query is small, like a simple select star on fewer rows, it'll allocate fewer compute workers to that query. If the query is like fairly complex with complex aggregation, then it'll fan out across like multiple distributed workers. And in the query execution, it generates a query execution ID and returns back to the user. So what it's doing is like it's running the query synchronously. You use one API to start the execution. You receive a query execution ID, and then you use that query execution ID using another API call to get the results back. So that's what allows Athena to really scale based on the query needs, because it gives Athena the room to retry if the query fails, or like to adjust like the compute allocation as needed by the query before the query execution ID is sent back to the user.
I think you guys should, like, this diagram's awesome, but I'm sure folks would love you to go even gorier into the details. Like, you guys have learned a ton over the years, and I have not been in the Athena code a ton, but I've, on the S3 side, like worked with Athena customers, and I've used it, and I feel like, I don't know, there's like a decade of experience on like sizing queries and keeping like query ready environments warm. Like, do you want to speak to like a couple of the learnings or things that you got through that period of time?
Yeah, I can definitely touch on some of those, Andy. So the little arrow there going back from run query to allocate workers is one of those innovations, if you will. So when we plan query, we see it as a set of instructions for data to go read, joins to make. We can predict the size of those joins as they land on our workers, and that's basically an a priori input to the software that says, I think I need this many workers. If the software
I don't know
also,
what that word meant. I have to tell you, a priori.
A priori, so just in advance, right? So before the query starts, we have a reasonable guess based on this 10-year history of running, billions and billions of queries, right?
Okay.
Where we've learned these patterns, right? When I see this type of query, I have like an expectation for this type of runtime or this type of memory pressure, and that actually is this function inside of the service that is used to make this decision in the middle of the diagram, allocate workers. What I'm saying is that's a pretty good algorithm, but sometimes it can be wrong, right? So what the service does is if a query needs more resources, we have a very invisible way to shift the query to basically another cluster, run the query on a larger allocation of workers and proceed. So this happens completely invisibly to you, the end user, and is sort of the type of complexity that the service is trying to optimize over the basically 10 years in operation. So there's these little goodies kind of in many different places of the service. And another example is,
wait.
There are certain
that example, I think what you're saying is in the early days, the queries would get sized wrong and they would just fail or take forever.
Yeah.
And then you had to go do a whole bunch of detailed work, understanding query histories and sizing and build an estimator. And
absolutely
that helps a whole bunch, but then you kind of get it wrong once in a while, and then you had to do this adaptive thing of reallocating resources to it and scaling up or down a cluster in response to the way the query is going.
Yeah, and even taking that further, Andy, some queries they don't actually really need to use a ton of compute, so are we able to execute those basically in process or in the control plane as part of this metadata execution phase? So think about a tiered execution of queries, we have these optimizations in the service that happen all beneath the surface of the water that we're really proud of.
And it's so cool how all of this just happens in a few hundred milliseconds as well. We get the query, we plan it, we figure out what data it runs on, we assemble a cluster of compute instances, get those started on processing in such a short amount of time. It is that to me is one of the most mind-boggling things about Athena, how quickly all of this just happens.
And the fact that it can improve over time, right? That I can build an
that's what I was going to say.
API and you can roll out changes to the service over time.
It gets
better, right?
So it gets better.
Change.
Literally, day by day. Sorry, we're talking over each other. I apologize.
And this is a good time to say that Athena is running 1 billion queries a week, and most queries complete within 2 seconds. So you can imagine the scale Athena is supporting today.
Yeah,
and we would say well above 1 billion queries per week of customer traffic. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, we love the simplicity that we've built, and we every conversation that I'm a part of when we're talking about features that we're bringing to customers, we ask these questions: where is the complexity? Where can we take decisions out? Where can we be intelligent on behalf of customers?
Right.
And we really sweat those decisions. So it's part of our ethos for sure.
I tell you, and we have to stop here. But I'm with Andy on. I would love to see the nitty gritty of those decisions being made. I'm sure a lot of people would, to be honest. But super interesting conversation. We obviously need to have a continuance of this. I did feel like that was a made up word earlier, not because I feel like you made it up, but I was like, what? API? Yeah. So, but it's super impressed with that. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. This is really interesting. I'm sure there'll be some follow-up on this. I'm sorry for all the questions we didn't get to, but we do have a hard stop for the next show coming up. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much to you all, and thank you for all y'all. It's a Texas thing right there. All y'all for joining us and watching us. And next week, Julian will be back, and we'll see you then. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff. Jeff, thanks. As always, you rocked. Gentlemen, thank you. We'll see you later.